What's going on, team? Welcome back to the Fireside PM Pod. Today, I'm going to do a little bit of a solo discussion around the types of jobs out there. I've been working with a number of people in the last few weeks who are maybe for the first time. One of my clients said to me, "Tom, I've never actually had to look for a job," and I was like, "Yeah, it's a weird time." A lot of folks have been kind of on a blessed, very fortuitous journey where they've always been poached and, they kind of keep bumping around and moving up the ladder. And a lot of those people are now for the first time trying to figure out, ooh, what do I do now? Like I don't have an obvious thing to go to. And then there are people who are just coming out of business school or even undergrad who are saying, hey, um, I'm not sure what I should do for my first gig, and everything in between. So I thought this two by two would be potentially useful to some of you, in that there's no really right answer to this question. There's just like lots of different types of job opportunities out there. And um, they all are different along many axes, but I've got two laid out here. On the vertical axis, we have, is the job very aligned with your values and interests and something that you maybe spend 5, 10 years working on, or the rest of your career working on? You'd be totally happy about that. So a very common is, a missionary job is like climate or maybe healthcare or, civic tech. Those kinds of things are areas where someone's like, just working on even a small part, or space exploration, like a small part of this gigantic mission is what really gets me out of bed at night, uh, or in the morning. And then on the other side of that, you've got the mercenary jobs where it's like, look, I could be working on this, I could be working on something else. I'm doing it for other reasons. And I understand the mission, it's important, but it's not like, oh, if I could only work on one problem, this would be the problem. Nothing wrong with it. And over the course of your career, you're going to work on for sure, some mercenary jobs, but hopefully you'll also work on some missionary jobs and some kind of in between jobs. And then on the horizontal axis, you have this left right distinction between, on the left side, these are jobs where the floor to ceiling ratio of compensation is very high, meaning you may have very solid, predictable base income, but maybe the equity is not worth that much, or there is no equity, or the equity is already pretty richly priced, such that the likelihood of it, 100xing is small. So these are jobs that are pretty safe, and just pay almost like a bond. And then over on this right-hand side here, you have the high ceiling to floor ratio. This is your classic startup, right? Where they're going to pay you way less on base and even bonus than you could get elsewhere. But, you're going to get shares in this company that, could be the next Uber or Google or Airbnb or whatever. And so, again, like depending on where you are in your journey, one of these might be more attractive. And over the course of your career, you might move around a little bit. So, as an example, if you're right out of college and you found a role at a company that's super aligned with what you're really passionate about, and let's say it doesn't pay that much, but has a lot of upside, and you are in a financial place, maybe you've been lucky around, like you don't have a lot of college debt or whatever, then, looking at this kind of right hand side or trying to go for the Northeast quadrant, like makes a ton of sense. On the other hand, let's say you just finish grad school, you have a ton of debt, maybe you have a young child or you have more than one, then you may want to be a little bit more on the left hand side where you're like, hey, I can't afford literally to work for less than the top of the market in terms of predictable annual compensation. So for many of us, the decision is, are you on the left-hand side or on the right-hand side? And then the way you can then, once you pick the side that you're going to focus on, let's say for the next couple of years, then you try and differentiate the opportunities between the kind of northern and southern hemisphere. So if you're like, hey, I'm going to be on the left-hand side, you may say, well, gee, I really would love to work on an area that may be part of a big tech company that's doing stuff that is focused on a problem I care deeply about. Or you may say, oh, if I'm choosing between, let's say, the nonprofit option and a safe job, the size of the circle is kind of like your um, probability adjusted compensation. So you may say, wow, gee, like the nonprofit and the safe job are both predictable, but I'm going to make more money on the safe job. It's a bigger circle, but maybe it's not quite as mission oriented. But for where you are, like, if you got to pay for private school or daycare or whatever, like that might be the right call. So some other kind of circles on this 2x2 that I thought I'd call out. One is the long shot startup. Like we all know startups are improbable. There are some that are improbable and working on something you're really passionate about. Those are different than opportunistic startups. So a classic opportunistic startup might be a Series B or C company, but maybe they're working on something that you kind of find is interesting. It's a big problem from a business point of view, but isn't like, solving world peace or world hunger or whatever. It still could be a great option because it gives you this blend of you get a lot of upside and, it's not purely a mercenary job. And then one circle I will call out is like this infrastructure, fintech. These are like areas where they're not super sexy. It's like Scale.ai or Databricks or something like that, where it's really important. There aren't that many people that can do that job because they're usually very technical and require a lot of expertise in that vertical. And they also have some challenges attracting talent because the people that have those capabilities might often look at a startup that's a little bit more mission focused for them, or even they might go to a long shot just because, hey, they feel like, well, if that doesn't work out, I have great job security. I have some skills in the market that are highly sought after. So I just want to call out some of those different choices, and hopefully this is useful. Again, if you're in a career planning mode, first decide what side of this, left right quadrant you're in. And then secondly, when you're evaluating opportunities, think about which ones are more aligned with your values and what you're really excited about. So when you have those tough quarters, you're working on an important problem. And then the third element is like try and estimate the size of the circle. So, okay, what is the likely outcome in terms of the financial results for you and your family? So I hope that was helpful. I've noticed a lot of people who are really senior, especially in today's job market, are starting to say, you know what? I've done really well and I don't have to necessarily focus on maybe the southern hemisphere. I don't want to do any kind of mercenary roles, and maybe I can take on some risks. So I'm okay with some high kind of ceiling to floor ratio, or maybe they're like, you know what, I'm more in the actually northwest quadrant where I don't need a massive upside win, but I really want to focus on stuff that speaks to my values or my legacy or, the kinds of things that I want to spend my precious years on. So that's one classic persona. Then there's the other one, which is like the fresh grads for whom often they don't really care about the left right ratio. For them, it might actually be the size of the circle, not because they want to make as much money as possible, but often the big circles are where you get a lot of learnings. As an example, if you go to a moonshot startup, and it doesn't pan out, like you may not learn all the right lessons there. You go to big tech or a pre-IPO startup, you'll probably learn a lot there as a fresh grad. However, there are definitely plenty of examples where, going to a long shot startup or a moonshot could be like the best thing ever. So there's the early career, there's the really senior folks, and then let's lastly summarize like the maybe mid career folks who are they've really hit escape velocity. They're doing terrific work. There might be like a GPM or something like that. And for them, they can actually be a little bit more broad. They probably have enough financial wherewithal now to start going more towards the right hand side. But they could also be more picky about like, hey, now that I have all these skills, I want to go on the northern hemisphere. Ideally, there would be a big giant circle in the upper right. That rarely happens, but if you happen to find one, if you're like, oh, I have something where I have massive upside, it's totally aligned with what I want to do, and I have all of this evidence or intuition that it's going to be the next giant thing, like, my God, like, grab onto that. I think in hindsight, from my own personal experience, when I was just totally lucky enough to join Google in 2006, and that was, already they had become public, but it was a pretty exciting time. And it was probably close to that northeast quadrant where we were, trying to organize the world's information and make it useful and accessible. But we were printing money and just, doubling every 6 months kind of thing. Those types of things don't happen all the time. And sometimes you could be at one thing that kind of starts to shift over to the left, which is fine too, but maybe the circle increases in size. So feel free to use this framework as you think through your careers. And if you have any other questions or you want to talk through this stuff, I'm happy to meet with you one-on-one as part of my coaching practice. And I might even think about doing like a career planning course. So let me know in the comments if you have any questions, if you have any suggestions for other people watching this, good advice about the similar topic, or any questions for me. All right. See you guys next time, and let's get back to work.